Assalamu alaikum, let's explore this Islamic topic together. Hey, so, you know how we were talking about different historical city designs the other day? Well, I've been reading about Islamic city planning. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's not just about buildings. It's about creating a whole way of life. A reflection of what Muslims believe paradise to be like, hence the title, Paradise on Earth. Think about it, the Quran and the Sunnah. The teachings and practices of the Prophet Muhammad emphasize community, justice, and harmony. Islamic city planning is a direct attempt to physically manifest those ideals in the built environment. It's not just about aesthetics, although the architecture is stunning, but about creating a functional and spiritually uplifting space for everyone. It all stems from a profound belief that creating a just and beautiful society is a religious obligation. This isn't some abstract idea. It's woven into the very fabric of how Islamic societies were historically structured. The aim was to build cities that fostered spiritual growth, social interaction, and economic prosperity, all within a framework that honored God's creation. Now, imagine a city designed around a central mosque, the heart of the community. Not just a place of worship, but a hub for education, social gatherings, and even legal matters. It was the focal point, both physically and spiritually. And the streets leading to the mosque weren't just random pathways. They were carefully planned to facilitate movement, creating a sense of order and accessibility. Think of it as the city's circulatory system, everything flowing efficiently toward its spiritual center. Then you'd have the souks, the bustling marketplaces. These weren't just places to buy and sell goods. They were vibrant social spaces, full of energy and interaction. Different trades were often grouped together. You might have a whole street dedicated to weavers, another to metal workers, and so on. This created a sense of community amongst artisans and encouraged collaboration. And speaking of community, Islamic city planning emphasized creating neighborhoods that were relatively self-sufficient. This wasn't about isolation. It was about fostering a sense of belonging and responsibility within smaller, more manageable units. People lived, worked, and worshipped within a close-knit area, reducing travel distances and promoting social cohesion. It's a lot like the idea of a village within a city, offering a strong sense of community and mutual support. Water played a crucial role, too. Many Islamic cities were built near waters, and intricate systems of canals and fountains were incorporated into the urban design. Think of the Alhambra in Granada, or the stunning water features of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. These weren't mere decorations. They were essential for sanitation, irrigation, and a sense of tranquility. Water was seen as a divine blessing, and its presence throughout the city was meant to reflect this. Let's not forget the gardens and green spaces. Islamic cities were really concrete jungles. Gardens, both public and private, were carefully integrated into the urban fabric. These provided respite from the bustling streets, offering spaces for contemplation, recreation, and a connection with nature. This emphasis on greenery wasn't just aesthetic. It reflected a deep respect for the natural world, a perspective rooted in Islamic teachings about stewardship of the environment. And the architecture itself? Oh, it's breathtaking. The use of geometric patterns, intricate details, and the incorporation of natural light all contributed to creating spaces that were both beautiful and functional. Think of the mosques, with their soaring minarets and intricate calligraphy, or the madrasas, religious schools, which often featured stunning courtyards and libraries. Each building was designed with intention, reflecting a deep understanding of geom, aesthetics, and religious symbolism. But it wasn't just about grand buildings. The overall city layout was incredibly strategic. They add on things like accessibility for pedestrians, shaded streets to protect from the sun, and efficient waste disposal systems, all designed to enhance the quality of life for everyone. This shows a concern for the daily lives of the citizens, demonstrating the practical application of their religious and philosophical ideals. Now, it's important to note that the ideal of paradise on earth wasn't always perfectly realized. Like any historical society, there were challenges and imperfections. The reality of life in these cities was undoubtedly complex, influenced by political power, economic inequalities, and social dynamics, but the underlying principles of justice, community, and harmony, those ideals remain central to the ambition behind Islamic city planning. So, when we talk about Islamic city planning, paradise on earth, quote, we're talking about a powerful aspiration, a desire to create a society that reflects the highest spiritual and ethical values. It's about seeing the city not simply as a collection of buildings, but as a living, breathing organism, reflecting the divine order and promoting a harmonious way of life for its inhabitants. And that, my friend, is something truly remarkable. Hey, so, we were talking about Islamic city planning the other day, right? That whole paradise on earth thing? It's actually way more fascinating than I initially thought. It wasn't just about building pretty mosques, although those are undeniably stunning. It was a whole philosophy, a way of creating a society that reflected their beliefs and ideals. Think of it as a grand, ambitious project, to build a little bit of heaven right here on earth. So, what actually began it all? It's tricky to pinpoint one single moment. You know, it wasn't like someone suddenly shouted, "Let's build paradise," and everyone started laying bricks. It evolved gradually, influenced by several things. Think of it as a beautiful tapes woven over centuries. Firstly, there's the Quran itself. It doesn't have detailed architectural blueprints, obviously, but the core values, justice, community, compassion, respect for nature, all heavily influenced how they approached urban design. The concept of a just and equitable society was paramount. Imagine a city where everyone had access to necessities. A place where different faiths and cultures could coexist peacefully. That was the ideal. Then you had the practical side of things. The early Islamic empire were expanding rapidly, conquering vast territories. Suddenly, they were responsible for administering massive populations in diverse regions. They needed efficient systems for managing trade, and daily life. Cities became crucial for this, centers of governance, commerce, and religious life. Medina, where the Prophet Muhammad established the first Muslim community, is a great starting point. Although not a planned city in the grand scheme of later Islamic cities, it provides a foundation. The way the community organized itself, the emphasis on communal living, the close proximity of the mosque to the marketplace, the fairness in distribution of all laid the groundwork for future urban planning. As the empire grew, the need for more sophisticated city planning became apparent. Think about Damascus, Baghdad, Cordoba. These weren't just random collections of buildings. They were carefully designed to reflect the ideal Islamic city. And where the real magic, or, if you prefer, the impressive engineering, begins. One of the key features was the central mosque. Not just as a place of worship, but as the heart of the city. It wasn't just a building. It was a community center. a place for gatherings, teaching, and discussions. Imagine it bustling with activity, a focal point for social and cultural life. Around the mosque, you'd typically find the marketplace, the souk, a vibrant hub of commerce where goods from across the empire were traded. It was a space for interaction, for exchange not just of goods but also of ideas and culture. This wasn't some sterile, modern shopping mall. It was a lively, sensory experience. The cities were also designed to be functional and practical. They often featured intricate water management systems, ensuring a reliable supply of fresh water for drinking, irrigation, and hygiene. Think canals, aqueducts, and public baths, essential elements contributing to a healthy and flourishing urban environment. Another important aspect was the emphasis on green spaces. Gardens and parks weren't just luxuries, they were integral parts of the city's design. They provided respite from the urban bustle, a place for recreation and contemplation. This reflects the Islamic reverence for nature, the belief in the beauty and bounty of God's creation. The layout itself was often quite systematic, with well-defined neighborhoods, streets, and squares. This wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about organization and efficiency. Imagine a city where you could easily find your way around, where everything was well organized and accessible. This efficient layout also helped to create a sense of order and harmony, reflecting the underlying principles of Islamic society. And finally, the overall ethos was one of inclusivity and tolerance. Different religious communities often lived side by side, with their own designated areas for worship and social life. This wasn't always perfect, of course, but the ideal was a city where people of diverse backgrounds could coexist peacefully and respectfully. So, paradise on earth. Well, maybe not literally paradise, but these early Islamic cities represented a significant attempt to create a society that reflected the ideals of justice, compassion, and community described in their faith. They were ambitious projects, reflecting a deep commitment to building a world that was more just, more harmonious, and more beautiful. It's a really fascinating story, blending faith, practicality, and a vision of an ideal society. What do you think? Pretty impressive, right? Hey, so, we were talking about Islamic city planning, right? Paradise on earth? That's a pretty bold claim, isn't it? But honestly, when you dig into it, there's a lot to unpack. We touched on the early stuff, the basics of how it all started. But things get really interesting in the middle chapters. Think about it, the early Islamic empire was exploding, expanding at an incredible rate. They weren't just conquering territory, they were building entire civilizations. And their approach to city planning wasn't just about throwing up buildings. It was deeply tied to their faith, their culture, and their understanding of a just and equitable society. It was about creating a physical manifestation of paradise, a place that reflected the harmony and balance they believed in. One of the most striking aspects was the emphasis on community. Forget sterile, grid-like city designs. Islamic cities were organic, evolving around central mosques, the heart of the community, the spiritual center. Imagine a bustling marketplace, a vibrant hub of activity, seamlessly integrated with residential areas. Think narrow, winding streets, shaded alleyways, not just for practical reasons, to protect from the sun, but to encourage interaction, neighborly connections. It wasn't about anonymity, it was about knowing your neighbor, supporting each other. This wasn't just some utopian dream. Many historical accounts and surviving city structures show these principles at play. Then there's the concept of madrasa. These weren't just schools. They were integral parts of the city's fabric. Often beautiful, ornate buildings attached to mosques are situated in key locations. Education wasn't a privilege for the elite. It was encouraged for everyone. And madrasas provided a pathway to knowledge, religious understanding, and even career advancement. Think about the implications: a society where learning was valued and accessible. It fundamentally shaped the city's intellectual and cultural landscape. And let's not forget the hospital's Bimaristans. These weren't simply places to treat the sick. They were pioneering medical centers, often incorporating research and advanced techniques for their time. They were staffed by highly skilled physicians, incorporating both traditional Islamic medicine and knowledge drawn from other cultures. Again, accessibility was key. These weren't exclusive facilities for the wealthy. They provided healthcare to everyone, regardless of their social standing or ability to pay. It reflected a belief in the inherent worth of every human being and a commitment to social responsibility. But it wasn't all perfect. Of course, we have to acknowledge the complexities. While the ideal aimed for a harmonious, equitable society, the reality was always more nuanced. Power dynamics played a role, as they always do. Wealth inequality existed, and not all cities perfectly embodied the idealized principles. The paradise aspect was often more of an aspiration, a constant striving towards an ideal rather than a fully realized utopia. Furthermore, the geographical con played a huge role. A city design that worked perfectly in the Fertile Crescent might not have translated as effectively to other regions. Climate, topography, available all these factors influenced the actual implementation of these planning ideals. Think about the different styles across the Islamic world too, from the grandeur of Damascus to the intricate beauty of Cordoba to the unique urban fabric of cities in Central Asia. Each region put its own spin on these shared principles, adapting them to its specific environment and cultural con. Then there's the lasting legacy. Even though the political and geographical landscape changed dramatically over centuries, the echoes of this approach to urban planning are still visible today. You can see hints of it in the layout of many old cities across the Islamic world. The way they organically evolved around central spaces, the enduring importance of community, and the continuing legacy of education and scholarship. So, paradise on earth, maybe not a literal paradise, but the attempt to create a just, harmonious, and intellectually vibrant society through careful urban planning is undeniable. It was a profound effort to create a physical space that reflected the ideals of their faith and their vision of a good life. And while the actual execution varied across time and place, the underlying principles remain fascinating and relevant even today, prompting us to consider how we design our own cities and what values we prioritize in shaping our communities. What do you think? Isn't it amazing to consider how much thought and intention went into these cities? Okay, so we've been talking about Islamic city planning, right? This whole idea of creating a paradise on earth through urban design. It's fascinating stuff, isn't it? And as we wrap up, thinking about how it all concluded, well, it's not like there was a grand finale, a big celebration, and everyone went home. It's more nuanced than that. Remember how we talked about the core principles? Things like the mosque as the heart of the city, the importance of the *souk* market as a social and economic hub, the emphasis on water features for both practical and aesthetic reasons, the intricate networks of streets designed for both commerce and community interaction. all aimed at creating a harmonious, just, and beautiful environment that reflected the ideals of Islam. The thing is, these principles weren't just theoretical. They were put into practice, creating some truly remarkable cities across vast swathes of history and geography. Think about Cordoba in its heyday, a bustling metropolis that was a center of learning and culture, with its magnificent Mezquita Cathedral standing as a testament to its grandeur. Or Baghdad, the center of the Abbasid Caliphate, a city renowned for its intellectual vibrancy and sophisticated infrastructure. These weren't just randomly thrown together. They were meticulously planned, reflecting a deep understanding of social dynamics, environmental considerations, and religious beliefs. But the conclusion, if you can call it that, isn't a single event. It's a complex story involving shifting power dynamics, evolving societal structures, and the impact of outside forces. The golden age of Islamic city planning didn't last forever. As empire rose and fell, the political landscape shifted, and consequently, so did the implementation of these urban ideals. Conquests, internal conflicts, and economic shifts all had their impact. For example, the Mongol invasions caused significant disruption, devastating many cities and interrupting the flow of knowledge and trade that had been essential to maintaining the urban infrastructure. While many cities recovered and adapted, the previous level of planned development and sophistication wasn't always replicated immediately. Another factor to consider is the ongoing interplay between religious ideals and practical realities. The utopian vision of a perfectly planned city reflecting paradise on earth was always a work in progress, constantly negotiated and adapted to the changing circumstances. Ideal planning clashed with political realities, economic pressures, and the ever-present human element. People built homes, businesses, and communities in ways that sometimes deviated from the initial blueprint. Cities evolved organically, influenced by both the original plans and the needs and desires of their inhabitants. Furthermore, the spread of Islamic city planning wasn't uniform. Different regions, with varying climates, and local traditions, adapted the core principles in diverse ways. What worked in a desert oasis wouldn't necessarily translate directly to a coastal city or a mountainous region. This created a rich tapes of urban forms, all bearing their own distinct character while sharing underlying similarities. So, the conclusion is less of a final chapter and more of a long, evolving story. Islamic city planning's influence continues to be felt today, subtly woven into the fabric of numerous cities across the world. We see echoes of its principles in the emphasis on community spaces, the integration of markets into urban life, and the enduring importance of mosques as places of worship and community gathering. While the grand-scale projects and the unified visions of the earlier periods may have faded, the underlying philosophy, the striving for a just, harmonious, and aesthetically pleasing urban environment, remains a powerful and relevant ideal. Think about it, the desire to create a beautiful and functional city that fosters a sense of community and provides for the well-being of its inhabitants is a universal aspiration. Islamic city planning, with its emphasis on social justice, environmental consciousness, and aesthetic beauty, offers a rich and insightful perspective on how to achieve this. It's not about a perfect, static endpoint, but rather a continuing dialogue about how to build better cities, both physically and spiritually. It's a legacy that continues to inspire architects, urban planners, and communities around the world, even if in often modified and adapted forms. The paradise on earth aspect isn't necessarily about literal paradise, but rather about striving for an ideal, a better, more equitable world built through thoughtful and intentional urban design. That's the true conclusion, I think, a continuous striving for that ideal, adapting and evolving with each generation and each new challenge. Hey, so, we were talking about Islamic city planning the other day, right? That whole paradise on earth idea. It's fascinating when you really think about it. It's not just some historical curiosity. It's something that still resonates deeply with Muslim communities today, even if we don't always realize it. Think about it, Islamic city planning isn't just about stacking buildings. It's deeply rooted in religious principles, aiming to create a society that reflects the ideals of justice, harmony, and community that are central to Islam. It's about creating a physical space that nourishes the soul, just like the Quran speaks about paradise. Historically, you see this vision reflected in incredible cities like Baghdad during the Abbasid Caliphate. Imagine it, a city bursting with intellectual life, bustling markets, magnificent mosques, intricate irrigation systems, a true center of learning and commerce. They had libraries that rivaled anything in the world at the time. Hospitals, schools, all integrated into a carefully planned urban fabric. It wasn't just about grandeur, it was about functionality and social cohesion. They even had planned spaces for different social groups and activities. Imagine a city meticulously designed to ensure everyone had a place and a purpose. The core principles often involved elements like the misra, the central area usually including the mosque and the marketplace. The *souk*. Imagine this vibrant hub of activity, a melting pot of cultures and goods, a truly social heart of the city. Then, you'd have residential areas radiating outwards, often with smaller local mosques and communal spaces. The idea was to create a sense of community, to foster interaction and support, preventing isolation. Think about how that differs from some modern cities where people barely know their neighbors. And then there's the emphasis on environmental sustainability. Islamic city planning often incorporated ingenious water management systems, gardens, and green spaces. Think of the importance of water in Islamic culture. It's not just a necessity. It's a symbol of life, purity, and blessings. These cities weren't just about bricks and mortar. They were designed to be in harmony with nature. They understood the importance of clean water, shaded streets, and access to fresh air. All things we are increasingly valuing again in our own modern times. To undo the damage of unplanned urban sprawl. Now, the paradise on earth aspect isn't about a literal replica of Jannah. Of course, it's more about striving to achieve its essence, justice, equity, compassion, and beauty. It was about creating a society that fostered spiritual growth alongside material prosperity. The mosque wasn't just a place of worship. It was the central gathering point, a place of education, social interaction, and community service. It was the very center of life. But here's where it gets really interesting for us today. What can we learn from this historical approach to city planning? I think a lot. In our increasingly fragmented and individualistic world, the emphasis on community building, social justice, and environmental responsibility feels incredibly relevant. We're grappling with issues like urban sprawl, inequality, and environmental degradation, problems that could have been mitigated with a more thoughtful, holistic approach to city planning. Think about how many modern cities prioritize fast development and profit over human well-being and environmental sustainability. We often end up with isolated communities, lack of green spaces, and a general disconnect between people and their environment. Islamic city planning, with its emphasis on integration, community, and environmental sensitivity, offers a powerful counter-narrative. It reminds us that a city should be more than just a collection of buildings. It should be a living, breathing organism that nourishes the human spirit. Of course, applying these ancient principles to the modern world isn't a simple matter of copying and pasting. We need to adapt them to contemporary cons, technological advancements, and diverse cultural needs. But the underlying principles of justice, community, sustainability, and the integration of spiritual and material life remain powerfully relevant. For Muslims today, I think it's a call to be more conscious and intentional in how we build and inhabit our urban spaces. It's a call to advocate for inclusive and sustainable urban development that prioritizes the well-being of all members of society, reflecting those values of justice, compassion, and community that lie at the heart of our faith. It's not about recreating 9th century Baghdad, but it's about carrying forward its spirit of thoughtful, purposeful urban design. A reminder that even the physical space we inhabit can contribute to our spiritual and communal well-being, helping to build a world that reflects, however imperfectly, the ideals of paradise. It's a challenge to be better city builders and better citizens, striving for a society that truly lives up to the values we hold dear. What do you think? Goodbye. May Allah bless us all. That's our discussion for today.